Hi everyone, how are you? So as you know, besides being a tarot reader, I am an astrologer as well. And I've been studying astrology since the 1990s. And in the 1990s, I bought this book, The Astrological Chart of the United States from 1776 to 2141 by Gar Osten. And I'm bringing up this book because he's very accurate about things. He was born in 1923 and he died in 1991. And he published this book in 1976. And he was a historian as well as an astrologer. And this is a picture of him here. It says Gar Osten has used his skills to predict successfully such recent events as the assassination attempt on Governor George Wallace, the stock market slide, the sudden elevation of Nelson Rockefeller, the national office, and the capture of Patricia Hearst. He is quickly establishing a reputation as one of the most promising young astrologers working in the United States today. So again, that was 1976. And I believe he lived in Iowa. Yeah. So anyways, he used the mundane astrology. He used the chart for the United States. This is the chart he uses, so you can see that. July 4th, 1776, 3:01 a.m. And again, he gives an explanation why he chose that time. I'm not going to get into that at all in that. But some other charts he puts here too. So again, what he did basically is he went through all the historical events in the United States and looked at the general cycles, the progressions, and with his knowledge of history and research, he predicted going forward what he thought would happen. And when I first read this in the 1990s, of course, I looked to the future to see what to expect, and I just couldn't believe what he wrote at the time. I said, no way. So I'm just going to skip to the good part here. 2007 to 2008, Mars retrograde. This is a major cause of our problems, astrologically speaking. Mars has never gone retrograde before in the United States mundane chart. So that means what we're seeing a lot of are things that this country has never dealt with before. So Mars retrograde, the planet of war, internal strife, and division. Sound familiar? Is likely to be serious because of its close proximity to the U.S. natal Saturn, which, we can see that, rules the 8th house cusp of mortality. Ooh, lots of death going on. This points to the beginning of an 87-year cycle of intense activity, with particular emphasis upon the military and armed forces. It could mark the rise of a dictatorship. It could mark the rise of a dictatorship. Now, I first read that 20 years ago. I was like, what? Dictatorship? The United States? Come on. He doesn't write like that with earlier predictions. He's not writing stuff like that. He's not like, oh yeah, this is the one time he mentions it. So he says it's the rise of a dictatorship, with 2031 and 2032 being especially dangerous. So now, remember, this book was published in 1976. There's no way for him to have known, for sure. And furthermore, for him to say, well, this starts in 27, 28, and you may see I wrote in the notes here, Obama was elected in 2008 and started his presidency in 2009 to 17. So that was really the beginning of the problems we're in right now, as people have pointed out, because he started centralizing everything with our healthcare, making all the doctors report to the insurance companies and the hospitals to the NIH, so that when this pandemic began, all the hospitals followed the same protocol from Fauci. Right? They all used remdesivir, which caused kidney failure and deaths, and they blamed it on COVID, et cetera, et cetera. They're all following because they all have to follow orders from the top, right? Doctors are afraid of losing their licenses, losing their jobs. Obama set this up. There's many things that Obama did to set up the situation we're in now by centralizing, and did the same with education, health, And of course, we know he's very much behind the scenes with Biden, right? They call it old Biden, right? So it's interesting that Gar Osten points out, well, this is going to be, Mars retrograde, um, very divisive, planet of war and division, basically getting attacked here, a lot of death, and marking a dictatorship, a rise of a dictatorship at this point with Obama's presidency up until 2030, 31, 32. And of course, I don't know if Agenda 2030 was around in the early 1970s, and if Gar Osten was aware of that, it's possible. But he backs up everything he's saying based on astrology, he doesn't mention UN agendas or anything like that. So I don't think it was based on that. I think it was based on astrology here, because Mars is the planet of war and aggression. And if you follow astrology, you know that for a planet to go retrograde for the first time in a chart of a country or a person, is in progression like this is can change your whole life, and it is very strong impact. And of course, we're feeling it. So there will be considerable emphasis on the 11th sphere of Congress or the states, which could suggest the elimination of the president in favor of a collective leadership of some kind because of national emergency. So he's talking about dictatorship and elimination of the president. It's like, gee, you think people are thinking of eliminating the presidency in general right now? I think so. I mean, I don't think we've gotten to the point of getting rid of the position, but it looks like after all this, nobody's going to want this to happen again. What's going on? So, a president sitting down and shutting off oil refineries or our oil supply with a stroke of a pen, like Joe Biden's doing, or has done. The sixth house emphasis upon the working class suggests some kind of rebellion, civil war. And I think we're looking at civil war right now. What's going on, with the left and the right, and with the, leftist critical race theory versus, sanity, all this craziness going on. Drag queen story hour, and this divisiveness that's intentionally being inflicted on children, and the grooming and everything. So it is causing a civil war. I mean, look what's happening with Ron DeSantis in Florida. I mean, he's versus the rest of the Biden regime. So the blue and red states, etc. So we are looking at civil war-like action. So he says civil war or warlike action. So he doesn't necessarily say definitely a civil war, but obviously that's what many people have referred to this as. I mean, there's this polarization or divisive now. With heavy loss of life, which of course we are seeing that, and all of the insurance companies are coming out recently, starting in February 2022, when that insurance company in Indiana said, hey, we have a 40% increase in deaths. This is astronomical. What's going on? It's not from COVID, right? So, and he predicted this back in the 1970s. This is the first retrograde action of this planet, Mars, since the beginning of U.S. history. Contact between Mars and Saturn in 1812. So he goes back to earlier times in history to try to get an idea of, what will happen this time around. Because, right, the planets go around and around multiple times usually. And especially when you're looking at it, with progressions, it usually doesn't happen with people if we don't live that long. But with a country, you can go back hundreds of years and look and see the progressions repeating themselves. So, but he's saying contact between Mars and Saturn in 1812 brought a war, and the influence repeats itself in 1978 and 79. So again, he published this in 1976. So this will be a presidential election year, and will relate to the first Washington and Monroe administrations to the Tyler term. Okay, so it's interesting how he brings up this influence of Saturn and Mars in 1812 and then 1978 to 79. Because in those years is when we had Jimmy Carter as president. He was president from 1977 to 1981. And if you recall, right after he was allegedly elected, one of the first things Biden did, I don't know if you can see this picture so well, my little phone here. One of the first things he did was to pose for pictures with the Carters. So, and it was a bizarre picture, right? I mean, Biden and his wife, Nurse Jill, look huge next to these teeny tiny Carters, right? And somebody said, oh, it's just the way the camera was, but no, this is something going on here. So there's some connection, I believe, to Carter, Obama, and Biden here, and what the destruction of the United States. Now, for those of you old enough to remember the Carter years, we also had gas shortages, long lines at the gas station, inflation, sky high, right? And that was in the late 70s and affected us into the early 80s. It was a very difficult time. Groceries prices and gas prices went through the roof. So there is definitely a connection here with this Mars aspects indicating that there's some connection, direct connection with Carter, Obama, and Biden in this basically leading to a dictatorship, or attempting to lead to a dictatorship in the United States. They're destroying our energy supply and causing a lot of suffering, financial hardships and suffering, particularly with our energy supplies. And it's all connected, I believe. I mean, this is the only time Biden has gone and posed with a former president. We didn't see any other pictures of Biden with anyone else. He didn't pose for a big picture with the Clintons or with, anyone, or Bush or anything, even though with their buddies, I'm sure. But this is the only picture released of the Bidens with a former president that I'm aware of, and it was a big deal at the time. He made it was a big deal. They had to have this picture. They published this. It was all over the place. For some reason, they just had to get this picture out. And again, they always, these Illuminati or whatever you want to call them, it's always a message for the people right in front of your face. So there's some connection here if anyone knows what that is. But I do believe that they're somehow working together. New World Order, whatever it is, there's connections here. And it's astrologically shown. And Gar Osten predicted this in the early 1970s. I'm telling you, you can get this book if you can find it. It's old. It's probably out of print, I'm sure. But I'm telling you, astrology works. And yeah. So I'll leave it there so that you find that interesting. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.